right, we're live.
All right. Good evening. This is the March 17th St. Patrick's Day edition of the Economic and Community Development Committee. With us tonight are committee members, Jim Freyer, Council President Barbara Smith. Let's see, Jalen Seed is here. And council members Nicole Eady, Ann Wennerstrand, and Johan Lopez. I know we have some other council members coming in a few minutes later. And Heather Dunn. Whoops, sorry. Heather, I owe you one. And Nora Nadolski-Eichner is here too. It's not my best attendance call. Not my best. Okay, so since we are glad to have a lot of other council members who aren't on the committee, just as a reminder, we're going to go through the agenda. We have a few items from TMP. Anyone who isn't a voting member obviously has the right to ask any questions that you want, and then we'll, the committee members who are here, take a vote. Since we have 1, 2, 3, 4 committee members, we do have a quorum. So let's party. 5. I can't count either. But we do have a quorum. So with that, that was roll call. I'm sorry.
How about public participation?
Approval of the minutes of the January 16th, 2025 special meeting. Do I have a motion? Councilmember Dunn. Any amendments, corrections, additions? Seeing none, all in favor? Okay, unanimous. Now we have public participation. James, are there any members of the public who would like to speak tonight?
There are no attendees currently.
All right. All right. Then public participation is open and shut. Okay. So new business. Let's start with A1, transportation, mobility, and parking. Authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to enter into any and all project authorization letters and other documents required by ConnDOT needed for expenditure of funds under the Connecticut Department of Transportation's Urban Action Grant program for Route 53 Chestnut Hill Road Sidewalk Project. Do I have a motion? Councilmember Smith. Okay. Greg, is this you?
Yes, it is.
All right.
All right. Thank you, sir. And thank you, council members, for having us here tonight. So as the chairman alluded to, this is for a urban action grant for sidewalks along Chestnut Hill Road, which is State Route 53. Senator Duff was able to secure $600,000 for us to construct sidewalks along Chestnut Hill Road from Newtown Avenue all the way up to Field Street, which is approximately 1 mile in length. This will create a new sidewalk link, which is a crucial pedestrian link between Newtown and Fairfield and Field Street, excuse me, which lies within the watershed of the Cranberry Elementary School. Currently, the sidewalk from Newtown Avenue just disappears along Chestnut Hill Road. So this will provide a vital connection to that, to Field Street, which sidewalks are currently in existence today. So we are working right now to secure a consultant to perform the design work. And this item tonight would just be for the mayor to authorize the mayor to sign any and all documents related to the urban action grant that will come the city's way to accept the funds and proceed with the construction of the project. We're aiming to finalize the design and advertise this project for construction by late summer, with hopes of starting construction in the fall of this year.
And then if you start in the fall, when would construction estimate be completed?
Estimate completion, I mean, all depending upon weather. More than likely, if we start in the fall, it would be, probably early spring of 26 where it'll be finalized. But we're looking to fast track this as quick as possible and get a consultant on board to begin all the design work. It's a pretty straightforward design, but we also have to work within the the guidelines for for the funding program. And it is along a state road as well, so we'll have to go through the encroachment permit process through the state because it is their road. So we're hopeful to expedite that process and get it finalized as quick as possible and get this project under construction by the fall.
Okay, do any, Councilmember Smith?
Yeah, Greg, so how far where does it begin and where does it end? Because I know, it's close to Cranberry Elementary, and so I'm wondering, is there, something, is it Safe Streets to School? Is that a part of what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, so it's been identified, and this is something in working with the Safe Routes to School, and when we did a walk audit with Cranberry Elementary School last year, Chestnut Hill Road was deemed hazardous. So students were, even if they were within that walk shed area to walk to school per the state standard guidelines, they would still get a bus, even if they were within that distance. And so we were able to, look at it, and Senator Duff was gracious enough to get us that funding. So we're trying to make it not a, dangerous street for kids to walk to school on. So this would connect basically from Newtown Avenue, where there are sidewalks today, right where Cranberry Market is.
Yep.
And that would connect all the way up to Field Street, where there are existing sidewalks there as well. And would make that connection to the sidewalk, and then Field Street obviously connects to Noah Lot Lane, which brings you right to Cranberry Elementary School.
Okay. Perfect. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Greg? Well, this is a district delightful project. With that, I'll call for a vote. All in favor? Okay, passes unanimously. All right. Item number 2. Sorry, I'm flipping between tabs. Authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute an agreement between the city of Norwalk and VHB for 100% design services, bid advertisement, and bid analysis for the roundabout at the intersection of South Main Street, Meadow Street, Wilson Avenue, and Meadow Street Extension in an amount not to exceed $377,000. Do I have a motion? Councilmember Fryer. Ben, floor is yours.
Good evening, commissioners, and happy St. Patty's Day. So this is a project that I think most of you are aware of at this point. So this kind of goes hand in hand with the construction of the new South Norwalk Elementary School down there, which is, as far as I know, still scheduled to open this fall. So this roadway improvement is going to be, it's very exciting. It's Norwalk's first modern roundabout. So this, what we're asking for approval for today is just the design fee for our consultant VHB to tackle this project. So we're gonna be taking that kind of confusing kind of double T intersection, which is kind of split in half by that old rail spur abutment. And we're going to take down the rail spur abutment, the bridge abutment, and level the entire former rail spur property, which the city now owns, and use that as the new alignment for South Main Street. And that will tie into a nice circular roundabout at that intersection right next to the school. So the other part of the project, which we think is very important, is we're going to add some space on the west side of South Main Street, abutting the school for pickup and drop off. And the beauty of the roundabout is that parents will be able to use that to pick up and drop off, and then won't have to do an awkward 3-point turn in the middle of South Main Street. They'll be able to just go into the roundabout, do a 180, and come back out northward. So there's a lot of good things, and of course we'll be having a public meeting later on, hopefully this summer, as we get deeper into design. The reason why we want to, we're going to be pushing on the schedule for this a little bit is because we do want to take down that rail spur bridge abutment as soon as possible. and level that off. That way we have a nice clean slate for our designers to actually get in there and analyze the subsurface there, which will serve as the base for the new roadbed. So we're hoping to do that work as soon as this summer. Actually, ideally, sorry, this summer, because we don't want to have too much construction going on once school gets started in September.
Does anyone have any questions for Ben? Councilmember Smith?
Yeah, Ben, you may not have this available right at your fingertips, but is there some data that safety data around roundabouts? Because this, like you said, this is going to be our first real serious roundabout here in Norwalk, and I know that they are much safer than certainly the kind of intersection that is there now, and especially with the kids there. So I'm just curious, you have anything right handy?
I don't have any numerical data offhand, but you're exactly correct. Roundabouts are, as far as intersection design goes, they're a proven safety countermeasure,
I
rated by
believe
the
CONDOT
FHWA.
actually has an
And
excellent report about this kind of thing.
yeah,
Um,
let me look at that up, and I'll get back to all of you on
Yeah,
that.
okay. Yeah, thanks.
Councilmember Freyer?
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on that same thing. We've gotten some questions from people in West Norwalk where we're going to have the roundabout on Richards
Richards.
Avenue and what's the other one there?
West Cedar.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. And their concern was that it's going to create more traffic. So if that study also shows that it facilitates the movement of traffic a little bit more, that would be interesting to see. Any studies you have. Not
Yeah,
only make it safer, but make it flow through faster.
yeah, roundabouts benefit not just traffic safety by kind of deflecting the angle in which vehicles enter the intersection. It does also promote better flow for the intersection, and it's much more efficient than even a signal at certain times of day.
Yeah, because I'd like to give it to some of the people in West Norwalk. They'd be very interested in that. What my other question really was, I was passing through where that abutment is, and it looks like somebody's prepping it for some possibly a mural. Do you know anything about that?
I do not know about that.
As you go
I'll have
down,
to check that out.
as you're going down Meadow Street, it looks like the abutment has been all freshly painted, almost as if they were going to put a mural on it. So I can't say that somebody's got plans for it or not. I haven't heard anything about that.
I haven't heard about that. To my knowledge, there's nothing planned there. It's the only thing I can think of is maybe there was some graffiti and police or DPW had that painted over. I'll look into that though. That's interesting.
Yeah, I just saw it the other day. Otherwise, I would have asked Vanessa or somebody.
Yeah.
Can I ask, is there a concern about that?
Yep.
Are you thinking that?
Councilmember Darlene Young is here.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm glad. Go
No,
for
I
it.
don't think I don't think anybody's complaining about it. I just happened to notice. I mean, when Ben said they're going to tear it down, if there was some plans to put a mural on there, we ought to be aware of who wants to put the mural on and tell them to hold up on some paint.
Yeah, because I think at one point when they were talking about murals, that was a suggested spot, but I think that mural was done on that building on the corner there of Meadow and Martin Luther. Right, there's the intersection. There's
Yes.
Yeah.
That was a couple of years ago.
Wilson.
Yeah.
That's Wilson. It's the
Yeah,
pumping
and
station.
Wilson.
right.
The pumping station. Yeah, but I agree with you, Darlene, that it was more recently when we were talking about the mural over on West Avenue that there was there was some talks about some other murals going up, and I just want to make sure that we're not putting a mural up and then tearing the whole building down or the whole abutment down. Okay.
Yeah. I think the first person I'll ask is Sabrina when she gets back.
Yeah.
Because she's on the Arts and Culture Commission.
Yeah, she would know it best.
Okay.
Mhm.
Or maybe it was just to cover up some graffiti.
Yeah. So, thanks.
Does anyone, and just for the record, I think Darlene, I think you got here around 10 after 6. I didn't see the exact time, but just for the minutes. Um, Darlene, it's your district. I don't know if you had any other questions before we vote on this item.
No, I don't have any questions on it.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions?
I just have to say, I think it's going to be a necessary and needed improvement, so we've
Yeah.
got to do what we've got to do to make the traffic, as calm and as safe as possible for, for cars and people. So,
It's funny. I do have a thought, and I know that this is a prospective item that's on the agenda tonight about a roundabout that would be in effect not for this upcoming school year, but for the 2026-2027 school year. I don't know if this is something that TMP has been consulted on, but on the traffic plans for the school for this upcoming academic year, since there won't be a roundabout. If there have been any sort of considerations or thoughts about optimal traffic flow for the short-term issue. Ben, I don't expect you to have an answer to that tonight, but I don't know, but I just want to know if that's something that maybe the Board of Education, or the superintendent's office has contacted TMP about to discuss, or something that's just been a topic of discussion.
Well, I will say back when this was originally permitted, Langen, the school construction's designer and consultant, they did create a whole traffic control plan and management plan, not assuming that there was going to be any sort of new roadway reconstruction. So we have that to go off of, and the other part is that I believe that it's only opening to certain grade levels, maybe K to maybe the upper grade levels, or it's only going to be opening at about half capacity to my knowledge. And then they'll be adding a new grade level at each year.
Yeah, I think that's correct.
So
yes.
So with the reduction in students, it's not going to be as busy as it could be. So we won't be seeing like the full brunt of traffic impacts right away.
Barbara.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. There were some discussions about that in land use and building management. Just that it's expected to be kindergarten, first, second, and third grade.
Okay.
So not a full school.
Okay. Councilmember Young.
So just in hearing this conversation, I know when we first started talking about this, my concern, and I think everyone's concern, was the traffic of the trucks. And so we had talked about possibly changing times at some point. Did we all talk about that and I missed it? Or has that come up?
No, because the only thing we were really discussing that was about the roundabout plan. I just brought it up because I forgot what Ben brought up just now, which is that there was a traffic control plan in the original permitting application, and that obviously was discussed in land use. But how to deal with the short-term problem when the roundabout would be in place for next school, not next school year, but the school year after that. Nora, Councilmember Najewski Bickner.
Thank you, Justin. Just very briefly to follow up on Councilmember Young's point, is not relation to this item, but to this committee, is certainly, I think, the need for zoning enforcement to be discussed and to be prepared and to be ramping up over the next 6 months to get ready for kids being at that school and making sure that everyone is appropriately following all of the requirements of their permit, so that we're running into as few issues as possible, and then we can sort of address those issues that remain.
Noted. Okay. With that, unless there are any other questions, all in favor? That passes unanimously.
Thank you,
Okay.
council members.
Thank you, Ben. Last item for TMP. So this is number 3. Authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to enter in any and all documents and agreements required by CONDOT to accept funding related to the West Rocks Road Sidewalk Project under both state projects 102-365 and 102-374. Do I have a motion? Councilmember Seed. Greg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as you mentioned, this is a combination of two projects. Both have state project numbers attached to it. They are federally funded through two separate programs. The 365 is as part of a local road accident reduction program, and 374 is actually a federal earmark, which came from Congressman Hines as part of the congressionally directed spending. And these projects are for sidewalk and crosswalk improvements along the West Rocks Road corridor, which span from Adams Avenue all the way up to Creeping Hemlock Drive, which is approximately 2 miles in length. The project will incorporate traffic calming measures, multiple raised crosswalks, rectangular rapid flashing beacons, as well as speed sign flashing beacons as well around the school zones, which there are 3 schools along this corridor between Winston Prep, West Rocks Middle School, and then All Saints Catholic School as well. So there are very minimal crossings that are there today, and they're definitely not ADA compliant. So we would look to install ADA compliant crossings along with raised crosswalks as well to slow vehicular speeds, because we have seen a really bad speeding issue, especially from the Mare Parkway south going towards Blue Mountain Road as well through this corridor, just because of the width of the road, and just it is more of a downhill road. So we are looking to incorporate the traffic calming measures, especially, and provide safer crossings, especially at the schools. That will entail the RFBs as well. We did hold a public meeting on this project, both of these projects as well, last August, and we did get some valuable feedback, which we were able to incorporate some of that feedback into our next submission to DOT. And just for reference, DOT is administering these federal grants as well. We are bidding these projects out together as one, because they cross each other along the West Rocks Road corridor. So we're putting together the final touches on the bid package for construction, and we're going to be bidding it out by the end of March. We should receive an authorization to advertise by the DOT. So we're looking forward to that one, and getting this project under construction started up by the summer once school is out. That's our ultimate goal.
Okay, thanks, Greg. Does anyone have any questions? I just have one comment, and Greg, this isn't about you at all. But I gotta be honest, this funding was brought in by Jim Himes 3 years ago. The fact that we're talking about this now, 3 years later, and getting this going is frankly, it's incredibly disappointing, and like, it's a shame. And I know there are a lot of people who are angry about this kind of thing. There's a lot of talk about how we want to speed up government, make government, not all about process. And I hope that in the future, and I know this is not something that we are subject to on our level, but man, is it frustrating when projects like this take as long as they do to move through. So that's just... I
agree with you 100%.
Yeah, that's my one thought with this kind of thing. And this is not the only kind of project. And I know that I am not the only one who is frustrated about this kind of thing.
No, and we share your frustrations as well. We hope to get this going earlier, but the process is what it is, and we're moving forward with it now, and we're just looking to get this out to bid.
I hear you, and from where you're sitting, that's exactly the right thing to say. But I hope that we can change the process is what the process is. That's my point. But
I agree.
Beyond that, obviously, I will be supporting this measure. Does anyone else have any questions or concerns? With that, all in favor? Okay, that passes unanimously. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Ben. Thank you to Team TMP.
Thank you all.
Okay. Now we are on to new business B, planning and zoning. 1, authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute any and all documents to amend the plan of conservation and development to implement the recommendations of the Affordable Housing Action Plan. Do I have a motion? Someone, please. Councilmember Smith. Okay, Michelle and Steve, I don't know who's going first, so the floor is yours.
Michelle's gonna run the ship, so I'll jump in as needed.
Thanks, Steve.
I'll pull up some slides. And we'll get going. Short presentation. I know you all are familiar with this project. Can you see my slides?
Yep.
Alrighty. So, hi, I'm Michelle Jeske, Planning and Zoning. Like I said, you guys are familiar with this project. So the Norwalk put together a affordable housing action plan, and we're here before you for the final and formal adoption. So I'm just going to give a high level overview, and then we can discuss or answer questions after. So in addition to it being a state requirement and why we did this plan, Norwalk needed to see how we can address the housing demand and needs into a plan and come up with an action plan that could be implementable. And then in addition to the really why the state had required it, this plan is going to be updated every 5 years. The plan shows where housing needs to be increased. We held public informational meetings for residents in the plan development process. There will be a public notice requirement for the public hearing, and the draft is made available already online in a couple of places. And then following adoption, the municipality must regularly review and maintain their affordable housing plan, which we intend to do. So the outreach process was a large and an important process for this plan. The project started over a year ago, and it started with identifying needs to help drive the policy and implementation of the plan. This required a broad range of community engagement opportunities. We interviewed professionals like realtors, brokers, and developers. We sat down with community service members, housing stakeholders, and made opportunity to speak with the residents through public forums, online and in person, pop-up events, and we did a survey in conjunction with the redevelopment agency. And then I'd like to also add that we had a steering committee that we checked in with throughout the planning process that helped steer the plan. So after we went through public outreach and coming up with a needs assessment, boiled down to our recommendations. So it came to 4 sections: zoning and land use. So recommended changes for zoning regulations, like the workforce housing regulations, tweaking the state median income that we're going to be using, the 10% requirement for developments, whether or not is 10% good, should we, look at it further, things like that. The public-private partnerships, an example is construction of new affordable housing units through underutilized city-owned land. So coming up with a list of those properties and what we could do with them, what are the constraints could be, and how we'll tackle that. The other section is tax and financing and innovations, local tax incentives to facilitate affordable housing. So we intend to have a speaker come in April to the Ad Hoc Affordable Housing Committee to come speak on that statute of our options. I think that option, you can really tailor it to what kind of housing that you're looking for. And then lastly, the federal and state advocacy. We already started working on a number of those as well to see what we could push for. And then an example is lobbying to change barriers to unit types and expand affordable housing programs. And then I highlighted the priority action items that came from that actions matrix that the consultant came up with. And these are the top 5: expansion of inclusionary zoning provisions, like I said, construction of affordable units and city land property, update naturally affordable units. So coming up with a program to update those units, but have them be deed restricted as affordable. So they'll be, you know, in perpetuity of affordability. And then, like I said, the tax incentive policy for affordable units, and then advocate for more governmental funding for public and affordable housing.
Just want to note for the
So-
record, sorry, really quickly, Lisa Shanahan has joined the meeting. Let's say 6:30. Sorry, Michelle.
Great. And then I just wanted to highlight the latest changes made to the plan. So following that joint meeting with Common Council and Planning and Zoning, there was a handful of changes that were suggested to be made. So this is just the last response of the latest changes that we put in, mostly minor examples, added action items, adding resources and examples to it, and addressing how, you know, questions that came up and what would be addressed. And then what's next and what we've been already working on, because we've been eager to just start cracking on this plan prior to the final adoption. But in zoning, we've been working on 3 potential zoning amendments. One, I believe, was passed and should be effective shortly, which is the 2-bedroom unit count as 1.5 workforce housing units. 2 other items we're working out language for is the increase in 80% SMI to 90% for recertifying tenants. So folks that get a bonus within the year and they go to recertify, they don't lose their housing. So trying to get that wiggle room. The big caveat with that is eventually some of those units over time may chip away at our affordability percent. So just keeping that in mind, coming up with solutions like that. Legislative proposals, like I said, we've had 3 in the works. We're working up memos for food desert for South Norwalk. So, you know, with increased density and sorry, my dog just came upstairs. Increased density and
This is a program committee. It's all good.
he's just like jumping all over me. Sorry. So for food deserts in South Norwalk, we just want to know that it's, you know, density and supporting grocery stores and TOD development. So coming up with legislation that supports those types of uses. And then for home ownerships for condominiums, I know we've seen a lack of condominiums developments. So being able to see where there are legislative issues and fixing those. And then the tax sale to home ownership. We saw an example in Massachusetts recently where Massachusetts allows a housing agency to have the right first refusal on houses that are in the tax sale that are being foreclosed on. So it opens up an opportunity to have more home ownership in Norwalk. And then a slew of other things we've been working on. We had at the Ad Hoc Affordable Housing Committee, the Community Land Trust guy come and explain, you know, options and how those work. In April, we're going to have tax incentive policy representative come and speak to the Ad Hoc Affordable Housing Committee. And then we're still moving forward with the affordable housing account and what that will look like, when the application will look like. We'll discuss that at the next meeting, actually, this coming week. And then we put together an affordable housing plan tracker, which ultimately puts that action plan into Excel and just allows being able to see who's in charge of what's being moved, what are the issues, people that came and presented, things like that. And then this year, we're hoping to have a housing forum that was similar to the enforcement open house that we had last year, I believe, or the year before. And this will just have all the housing folks explaining resources to community residents and people interested in affordable housing and things like that. So that's ultimately what I have prepared. I'm happy for any questions.
So I want to throw the first set of questions. So Nora Nadelsky-Eichner chairs our Affordable Housing Ad Hoc Committee. So I wanted to give her sort of the first comments, questions. So Nora, take it away.
And I will be very brief, but to say a real thank you to Michelle and Steve, who I think have taken very seriously our request that this not sort of be a sit on the shelf report, but really be something that is moving. So I think you heard from Michelle, we've got plans in place already for events. We've got speakers lined up. I think the tracker will be very helpful. We actually will be able to see who is working on which items. Joining us this month will be redevelopment and the Norwalk Housing Authority, because some of the items on the plan were sort of, assigned or were recommended for them to work on. So we're going to try to get some input from them in terms of what their priorities are, which of these items they're moving. So I just really invite all of these committee members. There's going to be significant overlap, right? And so the goal really is come to the meetings. If you're interested, send comments, ask questions. We really want to get these items sort of moving along, and again, really identify. I think Michelle did a really nice job of laying out a real look at what is low hanging fruit, what can we change now, what can we sort of get moving that makes things a little bit better, and how can we kind of get the planning process started for some of these bigger, harder questions, right? When you look at the map of what the city owns, it's not a lot. And most of what we own, we use. I think there are obvious parcels in question. The former Columbus School is an obvious opportunity. There are a few other smaller places. Folks have flagged. We obviously, we're all aware of the fact that the parking lot in South Norwalk at where the Seatown is, I'm blanking on the name of whatever we call that parking lot. Like there are a few places, but many of the slots are smaller, and we're going to have to think about how we can be more creative. So this is going to be a place where I think community awareness and knowledge and input from a very early stage is going to be important to getting these projects right and really figuring out what the right mix of opportunities are to leverage what we've got at a price we can afford, which is going to be the challenge with all of this.
Thank you, Nora. Other council members who want to weigh in, ask questions, comments? Councilmember Smith.
Sure, just some comments. I would like to thank Steve and Michelle very much for all of your very hard work on this. It's such a complex, difficult issue. We are not alone. Norwalk is not alone. This is not just a national crisis, but it's a global crisis, right? And so I think that some of the ideas that have come up. I see that I keep freezing, so sorry about that, but I think you can still hear me. Are creative and thoughtful. And Nora, I want to thank you very much for your real passion around this issue. In fact, all the members of the Ad Hoc Affordable Housing Committee just really tackling these difficult issues. And I think we have a good plan. So and I imagine as we move forward, we may see areas where we can tweak and continue thinking creatively. So thanks to everyone.
I couldn't agree with all that more. I would just note one of the couple comments. One, the housing needs assessment that is an appendix to this report. I think this is required reading for anyone who cares or has any interest in housing policy and how it directly affects Norwalk. I think the most important stats to take away include the fact that I think it's nearly 40% of Norwalkers pay at least 30% of their household income on housing costs. There are 14,000 cost-burdened families in Norwalk, of which I believe it's something along the lines of 37% of those are renters. So it's about not only providing pathways to home ownership, but also pathways to more affordable rental options. And that there's just a genuine lack of deep affordable housing. So where and I like that the Planning and Zoning Commission is taking some of the recommendations from this plan and including increasing the opportunities for development of that deep affordable housing. I know some of you were at a groundbreaking in December for a project that Open Doors is spearheading on Berkeley Street for multifamily units where it's for families, not just, 1 or 2 bedroom apartments, at that sort of deeply affordable rate. And then I just, I think it's also really important to acknowledge that there are many people in Norwalk who earn less than $50,000 a year. And those people are the ones who are getting squeezed the most.
A third.
A
Okay.
third. Yeah. I mean, I had the number this morning. I couldn't remember it right this moment, but yeah, it's a lot of people. And that is in particular, those people are getting hit the hardest by what are these sort of national and, as Barbara said, international trends. And it's our job, I think, at every level of government, to be fighting back and being creative. And I think this plan really helps to do that. I also just want to acknowledge, if you see on the first page, there's the Affordable Housing Plan Advisory Committee, which includes some council members, Nicole Ayers, Greg Burnett, Nicole Eady, who I see is here, and as well as a number of community members, Brian Badoli from Redevelopment, Adam Bavilsky, Michelle Conzarino, Brian Griffin, Nick Canner, Sonia Oliver, Brenda Penn Williams, Harlan Stone, Anna Tabachnik, a lot of people who've spent a real lot of time and effort and who genuinely care about this issue. And so their contributions are valuable and are deserving of recognition. This issue is so important, and this is something that, and I'm so glad that Nora is sort of leading our charge on the ad hoc committee to keeping a light on this, but it's on all of us. And so we'll be right there, working beside you. Nora, I see your hands up.
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt. Just one other stat from that study that I think is incredibly relevant to this particular committee that I wanted to flag, which is that at this point, 75% of the people who work in Norwalk commute from outside the city. That stunned me. I have to say that most of the other stats were things that I had heard or had expected. That was really jaw-dropping. And I think has a great deal to do with, traffic concerns, with all of the work of TMP, but also with all of the, economic development. It is going to be hard to get people to, open offices here if people can't afford to live here. So I think that that really is a stat we need to keep in mind as we think about how we can meet the needs of our city. That was not, I don't think is quite what the goal of any of us have for sort of, the intersection of living and working in a place. So I just want to make sure I included that in your summary of the stats that I think we need to.
No, I think that's, I was floored by that stat as well. Councilmember Dunn, I see your hand up.
I just, along this, because I did read and take a lot of notes about it. I was shocked that only 22% of the Newark residents work in the city. I was also shocked with all our transit or development that's going on that only 14.3% of people commute to New York City. So where are they commuting to would be a good question. But I have other questions specific. So yes, I think those numbers are really interesting and important to dig into, 13%, 14% commute to Stamford. So if we don't have a lot of people working and living in the city, is that something we need to focus on? And what kind of jobs are here? It said a third of the jobs in Norwalk are less than 40,000 a year. That's pretty shocking to me. And I think I've said in other meetings, I think we need to do a lot of business development, and a lot of this does not happen in a vacuum. So I think, really focusing on what kind of jobs and what kind of opportunities we can create for the people who live and work here so that we can increase the numbers of people who live and work here, I think is very important.
I think those are all very valid points.
Can I start with my question?
Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I thought you were wrapping up.
No,
Go,
please.
please.
It's coming. So I guess this is mostly for Steve and Michelle. So my questions were, I noticed on your PowerPoint, you talked about legislative requirements that putting into things for like food to alleviate food deserts, especially in South Norwalk and stuff. Are there other things that are important, like, for me, that I would think would be if somebody's going to build something with a lot of units, that there's relatively close access to community recreation or open spaces and stuff like that, are we only really looking at food? Are there other things that we should be focused on that maybe other cities look at too? So that's my first question.
So the food one came about, and it really wasn't mentioned in the study. It's kind of a separate thing we were talking about a while ago. Actually, I think it came up in conversation when the master planning around the Webster Street lot came up, and what happens if Seatown left, and because it was you can't make them stay. If someone chooses to knock it down, then they choose to knock it down. You can't prevent it from leaving. We were talking with a developer about a program that was put in New York City about under a tax incentive program to incentivize grocery stores in areas that are underserved. So we started having conversations with the health department about what could we, get for data on that to kind of support something. So that's what kind of Michelle's looking at right now. And we'll kind of work then with our legislative delegation on putting something together that we think can help from that basis. So that, excuse me. So that was, really the genesis of that. And there's two other ones we're talking about that Michelle mentioned. One of them was based on Massachusetts law, where they have delinquent tax properties that, if they go on the tax sale, perhaps we can have the housing authority get right of first refusal to repurpose those properties, for, more affordable housing. So that was the second one. And the third one was one of the ones that came out of the plan itself, which was related to kind of barriers on condominium ownership. There's some issues we heard about at the state level, and this is again a little bit outside of my comfort level and knowledge base on, but there were some tax barriers that were really preventing more condo development, and that works directly against first-time home ownership, which is something we tried to do with some of the two-family zoning and the new zoning regulations. So those are the three that we decided to tackle first. I'm kind of thinking of it as we'd like to take more of a, from us at the planning level, as a more of a leadership role for, as opposed to just seeing what other areas are doing. These are areas that are priorities that will help our community, but also should help other communities as well.
But right now, there's
The
no
only question-
requirement for it.
Sorry, Heather.
Yeah, that's okay.
No, go for it. I had a question about the legislative,
Just along those lines too,
Yeah.
I know that they're doing a really good job. I love their new microforest idea and stuff like that. And I know that when I was working with the health department on things like food deserts, one of the things was, the hot zones where there were just a really lack of trees. And I know South Norwalk is one of those really extensive hot zones. I know we're trying to be the greenest city, but we also have areas where, more development's going to be less trees unless we plan accordingly. And I'd personally like to see that be part of this plan too.
Yeah, I think from the best way I guess I could answer that is from like a private development standpoint, we have standards in place now in terms of how much public realm they're required to provide, how much landscaping they're required to provide. But it would be different if it was like a city-owned parcel and we were kind of dictating the redevelopment scheme of how that would go. We would probably have different standards put in place as part of that.
Okay. So there's not a plan to, if they include more units, to reduce those requirements.
No,
Just-
we don't have anything along those lines now. I mean, we're happy to look at anything that, if someone thinks it's valuable, but we don't have anything pending for that.
So if we approve this plan as part of the POCD, and it goes as part of the POCD, as of right, when they come in for a special permit or something, they automatically can access that, right?
Well,
Without
so
requirements.
So kind of the whole idea about amending the POCD to include this plan is that it gives a nexus between amending regulations and also further like potential for grant funding. So it's like you put this plan together, you felt that this plan was worthy and important, so you're including it as part of your master planning for the entire community. So it's kind of an add-on for that. And the other reason to kind of keep it separate is I can, I can propose changes to the affordable housing plan that don't necessarily have to come back and change the whole POCD, so that it makes the process a little simpler going forward for that. But just because the plan is adopted, it doesn't mean anything particular happens, but it just opens the door for potential other funding opportunities, for different regulation changes. And it also gives weight, for council and also for the mayor's office to say, hey, wait a minute, we put this plan together. And if you take a look at the matrix that's put together, it has, whatever the tasks are, it gives a priority for those tasks and also has responsible parties for those tasks. So, the council and the mayor's office can say a year from now, like, hey, Steve, why didn't you do tasks X, Y, and Z? What's the problem here? Because the plan tells you to do that. And so that gives a little bit of level of accountability to it as well.
I guess my question about that is, what does that leave us open to litigation wise if a developer wants to do something that, you guys say, oh, I'd love to see you have more open space or more trees as part of the project. If it becomes part of the POCD and you deny it, or P&Z denies it, does it leave us open for litigation?
No, it could be because at the end of the day, while the POCDs has a lot of weight, it's a guide document. You're not required to adopt every recommendation within that. Like, so if they said you needed to increase the tree canopy by 50% in South Norwalk, if you don't, it doesn't mean you're up, potential target for litigation. It just means that you're either A, incapable of achieving your goal, or you're not working hard enough, or you haven't, put it out in the timeline where it's at that point yet. So no, I don't think that would be an issue at all.
Ask another question. So you guys can stop me because I've got a couple lists of them. One of the things the report talked about was the fact that we now have 1/5 of our population of Norwalk is seniors. And we know that those are people on fixed incomes. And your priorities, a lot of your things talk about, advocating for governmental funding, which to me says taxes. So raising taxes from the city. So I know this is like one part of it, but what's, when we talk about, I think Josh alluded to 39% of the people are cost burdened, and we have, that many seniors, I assume, on fixed incomes. What's the tracking? What I think is missing from this is the tracking of what the outcomes or of that are. Will it become 50% cost burden, 60% cost burden, especially if, again, 1/5 of our city is seniors that we don't want to lose,
Yeah, we spent a lot of time on the language within the matrix itself, because we had two completely different points of view about how the language should be structured. One was, don't make it so specific and so determinate that you have to do all these tasks right away and that each task has to be followed letter of the law, versus making them too wishy-washy, where then someone can say that, you even a little bit of effort, you achieved it. So we tried to, especially on ones where, being very cognizant of trying to, advocate for or require, additional funding sources that the city just might not be able to achieve. So that's why we had the language, set up the way it is. So it's something, we have to examine and look at and see what the viability of some of those recommendations are. We might dig into them more closely, because some of them are going to obviously require further study, have some expertise that we don't have. So we'll look at those, and they may turn out. And a good example of that was one of the key discussion points during the process was, right now we require 10% of the units to meet the city's workforce affordability requirements. But as the consultants started digging into that, considering it's not as bad as it was, but we're in a pretty high inflationary period, they were like, even at your current 10% standard, you're really pushing the envelope on making the projects economically viable for someone. So they're like, with the current economic climate, we wouldn't advise you to raise it above that 10%. So it's kind of those exercises where you go through and you look at each one of those recommendations and, going through the numbers and the calculations, it may not be viable for us to do some of these programs. But I think the idea is that, hey, these are things you can look at, and if it's economically viable, then go ahead and pursue that. But you may not be able to do it.
Okay. I think that was a very good discussion. I think that one of the things, and I think Nora said this before, but Steve and Michelle, I just want to say, your commitment to this issue and like actually putting the rubber to the road here is crucial. And it's so great that you have really hit the ground running. I had one question about the legislative, the recommendations or the things you're beginning to work on. I think one thing we're just going to have to sort out is how many of those are zoning code updates and how many of those are, honest to God, just ordinances, or other things that we as the council need to be really thinking about. I'm not sure if you've mapped out sort of how you feel sort of those legislative items that you're proposing we tackle first, sort of what bucket that might fall in. And you don't have to have an answer right now to this, but I do think that that's something you should consider, because an ordinance obviously comes with, I just saw Lisa just come right back. An ordinance carries certain powers that a zoning code update doesn't. And so I do think that's something we need to think about. And I don't know if you had any thoughts about that.
Yeah, I would say a bunch of them are probably going to be on the ordinance level. I think what the bigger issue, I think the step before that is I don't think the enabling legislation even allows us to tackle the ordinance piece yet. So that's where we're kind of looking at other models, what other states and communities have done. And if that's the case, then we'll, obviously kick it up to, working through the mayor's office, say, okay, here's 3 areas that we've identified as something that would have a great benefit to the city. Based on our research and working with, like Brian Candela or somebody like that, is there's a hurdle at the state level that we need to tackle first. And then if we can get over that hurdle, then it's coming back to the city on the ordinance side to enact something that would allow it.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, there's a strategic discussion, I think, to have with this sort of thing. And I don't want to have it in a public meeting at this point, but I have some thoughts about that kind of thing.
Okay, happy to hear it.
Okay, does anyone else have any questions, comments? Any of the council members who aren't on the committee, Nicole Eady, Ann Wennerstrand, I know I'm calling you out, but I just want to make sure if you have any questions or want to be heard, that you're heard.
I'm okay for now. Thank you.
Okay.
Chair, I mean, I think this is a very important discussion, and I think we've been having it in this city for a very, very long time about affordable housing. And as we continue to talk about it, buildings are being built, and as they, apartments go up, prices go up, cost of living goes up. And to be honest, you know that there are people that make under 50,000, under 40,000, that make 32,000, that are traveling distances. I think we just have to be mindful of all of that, and how do we include as much of that population as possible, because I get concerned when we talk about workforce housing, because workforce housing is a very different tax bracket, right?
Yep.
Income bracket in the city. And we're really talking about the professionals that work in the city. And if we're truly caring about folks who are truly at that income level, and that's not to say that that's what all of the development should be, but I think we really need to be inclusive of that as much as we can.
I couldn't agree more. And that's why I think the housing needs assessment so forcefully, I think, speaks to a lot of the challenges that people who are really at that lower income levels, who are like working people and who, are experiencing a lot of financial challenges, that really sort of sets the ground. And I think I couldn't agree more with this. And that's why I think projects and recommendations about expanding deep affordable housing are crucial. Councilmember Seed, I see your hand up.
Sorry about that. Yeah, just kind of piggybacking off of Councilman Young. These are like real people. These are
Yeah.
people that grew up here, that lived here, that work here. That I mean, they have it. Just people who don't live in Norwalk anymore, who've been affected by the cost of living. So it's an urgent thing. It's an important conversation, but it's real people, and it's something that's not only happening in Norwalk, like Councilwoman Smith said, but it's happening all over. But these are Norwalkers. These are
Right.
classmates, friends of ours who want to live in Norwalk, but are burdened by it. So I think it's important just for us to make sure that we're urgent about it, because these are real people and our friends that are feeling these effects.
You know, it's funny. A couple years ago, I got to ride the snowplow, and the DBW worker who I was with, who was the nicest guy, who'd grown up in South Norwalk, and we were using the snowplow and he was so deftly moving the snowplow through the very tight streets of South Norwalk. And it was honestly a feat like I've never seen before. And he grew up on the streets, and yet where he lived was not South Norwalk. He lived in Monroe. And, you know, I mean, that's a guy who should be living in Norwalk. He works in Norwalk. He grew up here. He's got family here. And yet, that's part of the workforce housing challenge is a lot of professionals who work for the city or the Board of Education can't afford to live here. But what Councilmember Young spoke to is just as big, if not a more pressing challenge, which is people who are, as Councilmember Seed said, living, working here, and who are really struggling to afford to live here because the cost of living is just going up so high, and we need to fight that. Councilmember Lopez, see you have your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, my camera's not working, but yeah, no, I was going to say that, look, I think access to affordable housing is really just a fundamental economic and moral obligation, right? And so there's ample evidence about the investment necessity in housing for economic stability and to lower excessive unhealthy levels of inequality. So I think it's more than just housing prices and this whole concern about, the people living in our neighborhoods or moving in and stuff like that, but it's more about providing people with access to greater economic opportunities, whether it's schools, jobs, social capital in general. And then lastly, I think there is a lot of studies that I've come across that really find no consistent link between housing developments or affordable housing developments and decreased property values when managed properly. So those are just a couple of thoughts that I just quickly wanted to share. Thank you.
Councilmember Smith.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I think Ms. Smith had her hand up first. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, I just listening to Councilmember Seed, it's just, this is an area where I can get kind of riled up, and the situation that we're in is 50 years or more in the making, right? You go back to trickle-down economics, you go back to bank deregulation, all of these things have just, year after year after year, put us into this situation. And post-pandemic, it's gotten so much worse, is, the split between the haves and the have-nots, and the loss of the middle class, and, rich people are getting richer and poor people are getting poorer. And this is such a major societal issue, and here we are, we're focused on what we can do for Norwalkers, but it's such a big issue. And so, I think that we have to speak out and rise up any way we can as citizens to, because to me, it feels like we're moving towards some kind of Dickensian society, and it's frightening. And, so I just, these are big issues, big issues. And, we want to focus on our Norwalkers, but it's bigger than us.
Councilmember Young, and then I think Councilmember Dunn had her hand up as well.
I've waited too long. I gotta think again.
I have a quick
Listen to what Barbara said. I
question.
just forgot it. It'll come back to me.
All right, Councilmember Dunn.
One of the statistics that was in there is that homeownership dropped from 65 to 55%. So why is in Norwalk do we have such a huge drop in homeownership? What do you attribute that to?
Well, I mean, if, I think one thing pretty clear is that, when you're adding apartments, you're adding multiples of units at a time. So, we haven't had wholesale redevelopment of single family zones. Those are basically intact from where they were. It's that the housing units that are there are, coming in multiples versus the single family, which is that percent, that number might not be changing as much as it is the percentage, if does that make sense?
So we've really focused on building more rentals and not home ownership opportunities.
Yeah. So we don't dictate home ownership within the regulations. It's not something we regulate, or I don't think we can regulate. That's one of the reasons why we're looking at that potential obstacles at the state level in terms of the legislation about home ownership versus, we allow you to build X number of units on a piece of property based off how big the land is. And then the individual developer, whomever, is the one that indicates that they're going to do it as apartments or they're going to do it as condos. It'd be good, it would be good to, have a chat with one of the developers or a couple of developers on why they don't do condos, and they'll give you a much more articulate answer on the barriers that they encounter when they go to develop those properties.
Are you finding that a lot more people are moving to, I don't know, I always joke that I, sell my house, not sell my house and rent it out to people. Are there a lot of people just choosing not to sell and rent their homes out?
That could be the case. I mean, I know
I guess is the question.
There's so many people, you always think about what you're doing in your situation, but if you're locked into a low interest rate, you might, wow, the housing market's great, I can sell my house in Norwalk, but where are you going to go that you're going to find a cheaper alternative now? You used to be able to go to South Carolina or something like that 5-6 years ago, but housing costs in many of these other areas are, almost as bad as they are here. And the interest rates are sky high right now, or sky high compared to where they were. So there's a lot of factors that are, make it a tight market. Plus the fact that, surrounding communities don't allow for much density in and around their areas where they should as well. So there's, as I think a couple of you have articulated, it's a super complex issue. The plan is not going to solve all this. I hate to be the bearer of bad news. Zoning is not going to be able to solve all these problems. The one thing I really wanted this plan to do is have good data, because the data will answer the questions. And listen, if we can't fix all these problems with this, we'll try to address as much as we can and just keep hitting as many things as we can hit.
I'm done. I just want to say thank you. That the data is amazing. There's data I've been looking for a long time. It did make me a little sick to my stomach, but yeah.
Sorry about that.
It did give some good information.
Councilmember Nadjelski-Eichner and then Councilmember Freyer.
So just very quickly to, I think some of the questions Councilmember Dunn flagged, part of why I'm really excited about the April meeting, and I really hope folks will be able to attend, is we are going to have an expert talk to us about tax incentives, because the economic opportunity zones are kind of a blunt instrument, right? Like they say within these zones, you can build and get these, tax breaks over time, period, full stop. And that's state law. This is not a Norwalk decision. And again, to remind everyone, one of the problems here is that we are very constrained by state law, given the way state law, community home rule was done in the 50s and 60s. We don't get to do things. The state has to give us permission to do them. And that, really limits our creativity here. But there's new property tax incentive law at the state level, or new-ish, I should say, is much more flexible, we think. And we think would allow more options, like saying, we think we need more condos in Norwalk to meet our housing goals. And so we can incentivize certain things as opposed to sort of a broad brush. So we're going to get much more information about that in April, I think, so that we can all begin to have much more informed conversations about what state law allows. And that I hope will help us then come to, at the council level, making some decisions about how we want to then rethink our tax incentive policies to potentially do things like incentivize more condos and more ownership opportunities. But we just need a lot more information. So I encourage everyone to come in April and hear, and we will then circulate lots, I think, more as we learn more, to get us all up to speed to make hopefully some good policy recommendations there.
That's the second Wednesday of the month, right?
No, we are supposed to be the third Wednesday, but that is a planning and zoning day, so it'll probably be the third Thursday.
Third Thursday. Thank you.
Yeah, and we'll circulate the reminder as soon as we've got a confirmed date.
Great. Councilmember Freyer, Councilmember Young.
Yeah, I'm really excited about learning more from some of the experts. I hear these percentages, and we're making maybe educated guesses as to why those percentages are the way they are. The percentage of home ownership decreasing over a period of time. The percentages of people that work in the city and live in the city. And I look back on some people that are in my position where my family's grown and moved away. And don't take this the wrong way, Jalen. I'm all for living in the city. If you love living in the city, you live here and you stay here, and you should be allowed to do it, definitely. But I'm curious, are there more people today that are growing up? At least many of my friends, their children grow up, get jobs that they're interested in that are not in this area, and very happy, and would like to come back for visits every once in a while. Enjoy coming back, believe it or not, to see me. But I often wonder now whether the demographics are changing and how they're changing and what's the rationale behind it. So I'm that hopefully we'll be able to take a look at some of the experts that Nora's talking about, can come in and maybe even answer some of those questions. I think we're very enthusiastic about all this stuff, and I certainly don't want to rush into something without really fully understanding the demographics and the dynamics of those percentages that, Heather has been talking about. They're really curious, and it really got me thinking very deeply about why, and I can think of different reasons why some of those things are going up, some of them going down, or why we got such a small percentage of people that commute into the city or come out of the city. So I'm really looking forward to it, and I want to get more involved, and so I fully understand what's happening. So thank you,
Nora. Thanks, Jim. Councilmember Young.
Thank you, Chair. This might be a little bit off topic, but Steve, have you seen an uptick in the accessory dwelling units? Has that been something that folks have been doing?
Yeah, we did. I don't have an exact number, and I can get you that. We have seen, since we loosened the regulations a little over a year ago, we have seen more built since then. And the commission, that's one of the things they've kind of kicked around. Should they try to loosen it up some more? I think it'd be probably, before we do that, just try to get a sense of, and I don't really know the best way to do it, try to do some polling or outreach somehow to see what within the regulations is a barrier, if at all. Because we tried to make like the fees very low, the procedure for obtaining that as easy as possible. So I'd be curious just to see what exactly, if anything, in our regulations is a barrier to that.
I'm actually pretty sure. I was told it was, Steve, I think it's like 23 ADUs were approved over the last 2 years, and that it had been about 260 from 1982 to 2023. And then in the last 2 years, it's been about, the number's gone up. You're right. I mean, it had been about 6 per year, and now it's about 12. But Councilmember Young, I think that's a very good question. And Steve, I don't know, I know a couple years ago, P and Z had added a site plan review requirement for ADUs, and I'm not sure that's still in place or not.
Just for the detached ones.
For the detached ones, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, does anyone else have any questions? Okay, well, this was a really wonderful discussion. Again, Steve and Michelle, we so appreciate your work on this. In case you're wondering, no, this is not the last time we'll be talking about this. I think there's a lot ahead, and I mean, between Nora's committee and you know, this is by no means the last time we will be talking about this. We're going to be talking about this a lot. But with that, we do have to vote. So the item that we started discussing about adding it to the planning, conservation and development. All in favor? In taking this to the council? Okay, that is I'm sorry, opposed. One opposed. Okay. So Councilmember Dunn opposes, everyone else votes in favor. That's it for the agenda. One motion left.
Motion
Come
to
on,
adjourn. Is that my
there we
usual
go.
job?
Yeah. All right. All in favor? All right. Again, thank you all for such a wonderful discussion and wonderful meeting. This meeting is adjourned as of 7:20 p.m.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Night.